Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Happy August 27th. It's a Wednesday, middle of the week, and we are coming to you from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. This is a special edition of Catholic Connection. As I mentioned yesterday, we wrapped up the program, and also at the beginning of the program, that I was heading out to D.C. for the Catholic Radio Conference, the EWTN Annual Catholic Radio Conference. And this year, it's very beautifully tied to the beautiful EWTN Family Celebration that is coming up this weekend, also in this area of, we call it D.C., but, you know, it's Virginia and the suburban areas of D.C., but it's kind of all wrapped into one. So it's just great to be here. And last night there was an open house or a meet and greet sponsored by our friends at Catholic Answers. And of course, that program airs every day right here on EWTN. You can hear it at 6 o'clock Eastern. And it's just great to see people not only from the network, because a lot of us work away from the network. Everything comes through the mothership down in Irondale, of course. But, you know, Dr. Ray, for example, works out of Canton, Ohio. I work out of Metro Detroit. Some people are blessed enough to be based down in Irondale/Birmingham, but most of us are coming from remote areas. So not only is it great to see our fellow radio hosts, but it's also great to reconnect with the affiliates, because the affiliates around the country do such an amazing job, not only of carrying our programming here at EWTN, but also just building the Catholic life in their own areas, in their own dioceses. And so many of these networks, I can remember when I first started with Catholic Radio, EWTN, Ave Maria Radio, over 23 years ago, that maybe this affiliate, this network had like one radio station, or they were just about to get two. For example, I remember when I did the first fundraising dinner for Real Presence Radio many years ago in Fargo, North Dakota, and the speaker, one of the speakers in addition to myself, was the amazing Samuel Aquila, who was bishop at the time, now of course the Archbishop of Denver. And I could just remember meeting him and talking to him about the importance of Catholic radio. And now you think about Real Presence Radio, how much they've grown. Or Stations of the Cross in New York. Or, of course, our wonderful friends in Guadalupe radio territory, which started in Texas, but now has affiliates all over the country. So it's really beautiful for us as the national hosts to come together and reconnect with each other, but also to see what's new with the affiliate. So it's just a lot of fun. So we are going to the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception today for a retreat, and then tomorrow we'll be broadcasting live. All of us, all day long, you'll hear live broadcasts from the host from the radio conference. So we'll fill you in on more details, and then I'll be heading back on Friday. I won't be on the air live on Friday. We'll have a special edition of Catholic Connection because I have to get back, because over the weekend I will be heading back, God willing, to the motherland, as we say, to Italy. Deacon Dom and I have 2 pilgrimages this fall and a lot of other work to do, so looking forward to that as well. But we'll give you some insight, especially during our live broadcast, as to what's happening at the radio conference. But don't forget, the family celebration is coming up on Saturday, and you can check it all out at EWTN.com. Coming up on the show today, speaking of Italy, as I mentioned earlier, we have Italy's Shrines and Wonders, which is something that I do based on my book, Italy Shrines and Wonders, which came out from EWTN earlier this year. And don't forget, with that book in mind, we developed a special free series through our mission advancement, and you can find out about the series through EWTN.com, Saints in Italy. And then we're going to be talking about an amazing event that is coming up in early September. It's going to be a huge rally at Notre Dame. Think about that. Our Lady's University, right? It's going to be the anniversary, 75th anniversary. And this is in honor of the late, great, venerable Father Patrick Peyton. They're having a Rosary Rally. It's dated for September 7th at Notre Dame, and you can find out all the information. I believe it's familyrosary.org, but we will give you the website coming up in the interview with the vice postulator for the cause of venerable Father Peyton, Father David Marcham. He's delightful. We've interviewed him before. He joins us again. And then we'll also be talking about how you can get information, how you can sign up, what to do. It's going to be streamed live. And we'll tell you all about the keynote speaker, by the way, who happens to be from my home parish in the Archdiocese of Detroit. Stay tuned for that information. Right now, though, we need to get to the weather and the news on a Wednesday morning. The National Weather Service says extreme heat is waning over the Pacific Northwest, but dry, gusty winds and isolated thunderstorms, dry thunderstorms will bring critical fire weather still to that part of the country and Intermountain West. Heavy rain, meanwhile, and thunderstorms continuing across portions of the Great Basin, Rockies, and central southern parts of the plains into the Ozarks. That's a look at your weather on a Wednesday. Now let's check the news here on a Wednesday morning on EWTN. In a joint message released August 26, the Latin and the Greek Orthodox Patriarchs of Jerusalem announcing or denouncing the evacuation of Gaza City in the face of an imminent Israel operation as a death sentence. The text stating that in light of the repeated announcements of a massive military mobilization and perhaps for an imminent offensive by the Israeli army to take control of Gaza, the first evacuation orders have been issued for civilians, including Christians, to be relocated in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. They urgently called on the international community to act for an end of this senseless and what they called destructive war and for the return of the missing people and the Israeli hostages. Catholic News Agency also reporting this morning that the President's Department of Health and Human Services is warning states and American territories they must remove references to gender ideology from K through 12 education materials or they will lose major federal funding. HHS sending letters dated August 26 to 40 states and D.C., as well as 5 territories that they say any state territory that fails to end the promotion of gender ideology in its implementation of the Personal Responsibility Education Program, or PREP, within the next 60 days will lose that PREP funding. The states and territories cumulatively receive more than $81.3 million annually from PREP, with most taking in a few $1 million and others receiving several $100,000 in funding. Meanwhile, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. is set to announce the causes of autism, and he says he'll do that by next month. The secretary discussing his intentions to reveal the causes of autism during a cabinet meeting held by the president yesterday.
We're finding certain interventions now that are clearly, almost certainly causing autism.
Kennedy has previously vowed to find the cause of what he calls growing rates of autism, saying it's an epidemic that dwarfs the COVID epidemic. He has long claimed that environmental factors or vaccines are likely culprits behind the rising rate of autism diagnoses, and the department's upcoming announcement is also expected to address possible ways of combating the identified causes. Rory O'Neill tells us that a new executive order signed by President Trump will establish specialized units in the National Guard.
The Defense Department is now under orders to create guard units specifically trained to tame civil unrest. Monday's order comes as the president considers deploying guard troops to cities like Chicago and Baltimore as part of a crackdown on crime. President Trump declared an emergency in Washington and used his authority to take over the police there temporarily. Some local leaders are pushing back, saying the president doesn't have the same authority in their communities. I'm Rory O'Neill.
And the president, meanwhile, says he's going to impose substantial tariffs on countries that do not remove digital taxes. William Denzel reports in a post on Truth Social yesterday. Trump also says he will restrict chip exports to those nations as well.
The EU has the ability to fine major tech players if deemed to not be in compliance with regulations such as the Digital Markets Act. Meta and Apple are among those accused of such violations, with the US saying that these rules amount to censorship.
Countries that pose digital taxes argue that companies such as Amazon operate within their borders, taking huge profits from citizens while paying nothing to the government. And the president also saying he's not worried about new legal threats from the Federal Reserve Board Governor Lisa Cook after taking the unprecedented step of letting her go.
She seems to have had an infraction, and she can't have an infraction, especially that infraction, because she's in charge of, if you think about it, mortgages, and we need people that are 100% above board, and it doesn't seem like she was.
Her removal following a Justice Department's criminal investigation into the board governor after she was accused of making false statements of home mortgage applications by the Federal Housing Finance Agency Director, Bill Pulte. And Texas lawmakers passing a plan to overhaul the way the students are tested in public schools in that state.
It reforms our Texas assessment program and strengthens the state's accountability system.
State Rep Brad Buckley saying a once-a-year assessment called the STAR test will now be replaced by 3 separate tests. They'll be given at the start, the middle, and the end of the year. The goal, he says, is to track student progress. Matt Madison tells us consumer confidence dipped this month.
The Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index fell by more than a point from the July reading as consumers became less optimistic about the economy. The monthly survey noted concerns about tariffs and higher prices, including food and groceries, rose again in August. Purchasing plans for homes remained stable, while discretionary spending for dining out, entertainment, and vacations were all down. I'm Matt Mattinson.
And more Gen Zers in America are becoming less inclined to describe themselves as thriving. The annual Voices of Gen Z surveyed participants aged 13 to 28, finding that 45% of them described themselves as thriving, making a drop from the 49% who considered themselves thriving in 2024 and the 47% who said the same in the 2023 study. Researchers believe the drop is likely fueled by adult members of Gen Z, as only 39% see themselves as thriving. The survey's school-age respondents were significantly more optimistic, with 56% thinking of themselves as indeed thriving. And finally, in our news segment on a Wednesday morning, again, the feast of St. Monica, Cracker Barrel is doing a 180 and ditching its new logo. Cracker Barrel unveiling its new logo last week that removed an older man leaning against a barrel. The response was mostly negative, and late Tuesday, the company said in a statement, "Our new logo is going away, and our old timer will remain." Even President Trump weighing in on the controversy, advising the restaurant chain should admit a mistake based on customer response. It's a Wednesday morning. More Catholic Connection coming your way, and we are in the D.C. area for the Catholic Radio Conference. Stay tuned. We're having a great Wednesday, and we are headed to the Basilica of the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in our nation's capital today for a beautiful day to be spent with our radio friends. A number of beautiful talks will be given, including by our own Janet Bankovic-Williams and Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Very excited about that. Today, though, is a feast of St. Monica. Tomorrow is a feast of her son, St. Augustine, two powerhouses in the faith. And oh boy, there are so many amazing places you may visit in Italy, across Italy, in honor of these two great saints. So what I thought we would do today, in honor of both saints, St. Monica today and St. Augustine tomorrow, is to look at these different places, because oftentimes people miss them. And yesterday, every week I do a segment on wonderful Dave Vacheris' show through Annunciation Radio, and we do tea time. Actually, vitamin T, and I take people to Italy and we do a description of a particular town, or maybe talk about a particular saint from Italy or who may be buried in Italy, and we take people off the beaten path, dedicated, of course, from my book, Italy, Shrines and Wonders, which is why we call this Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. And so I was thinking about all the amazing places where you can go to follow in the footsteps of these two giants of the faith, St. Monica and St. Augustine. Now, of course, St. Monica and St. Augustine were from Northern Africa, but St. Augustine fell away from his mother's Christian roots. She was trying to convert all her children, and he didn't want anything to do with it because, of course, he thought it was going to really restrict his fun. Now, I'm summarizing the story of this great doctor of the church and father of the church. But basically, because he was so intelligent and was such a great speaker, he really studied his way through all these different religions and ended up getting kind of close to Christianity, but not stepping into the water, just like touching his toes in the water. And he was into this faith called the Manichaean religion. I don't have time to go into the details about this particular religion, but he was so tired of his mom pestering him and saying, "Augustine, you know you're living a wrong life. This is not the true faith." He was very tired of her speaking to him about Christianity, so he decided to sneak away. And he was on his way to Rome, and he ended up in Ostia Antica. Now, Ostia Antica is just outside of Rome, and it is one of the prettiest places and most important places archaeologic-wise and also history-wise, which you may visit without too much trouble from Rome. For example, Deacon Dominic and I did this many years ago on our first trip to Ostia. You can just hop a train, and it's a great place to visit in the summertime, because if you want to beat the heat, you can stop at Ostia, see the history, see the places connected with St. Monica and St. Augustine. And then you can go on to the beach area, because outside of Rome, you have a number of beautiful beaches along, of course, the Mediterranean, and they're great places to hang out. They have chairs that you can rent. They have wonderful fish restaurants. It's just a beautiful scene. But don't miss Ostia Antica. So a little bit of background about it, first of all. Ostia Antica is an extraordinary Roman site, and also this is in my book, in Italy, containing the ruins of the ancient port town. Now, this town, brothers and sisters, was a very big, important town. It was a port town that served as a gateway to Rome. So naturally, this is where Augustine is going to go to try to get to Rome, because it's so close to Rome. It goes all the way back to at least the 4th century, which was the time, 4th century BC. But the 4th century was the time of St. Augustine, 4th century after the birth of Christ, obviously. It served as Rome's principal port for hundreds of years, and a witness and a monument to the rise of the ancient superpower, its dominance, and eventual decline. Just a half hour, 25 minutes from central Rome by train. And what I love about Ostia Antica is if you can't make it down to the Naples area, the Pompeii area, it has all the inspiration of Pompeii. It's not as big, okay, it's not as large, but you won't be bumping into hundreds of thousands of tourists. It's much more off the beaten path. Now, the landscape, of course, has changed over the centuries. It was slowly abandoned, and the sea gradually encroaching only a couple of miles away, the sand moving in, and so it's not on the water any longer, but you can certainly get the sense when you're there of the importance of this city. So Ostia Antica is important in the beginning of Augustine's journey when he runs away from his mother, but she ends up going there as well. Then he heads up to the place known as Milano in northern Italy, because he had taken a position. He was working in Rome for a little while after being in Ostia Antica. He had taken the position of, let's say, to simplify it, a teacher in rhetoric. And he heard about this Ambrose, this Bishop Ambrose, and heard about people talking about how great Ambrose was in terms of being a speaker and getting his message across. And so he decided to check out Ambrose, and you know the rest of the story. Of course, St. Monica, meanwhile, followed Augustine to Milan, and she talked to St. Ambrose about his conversion, trying to get her son back into the faith, and prayed unceasingly for her son's reversion or conversion. And we know the story. He heard Ambrose, and he was basically eventually convinced, and then Ambrose baptized him, and he baptized him under the Duomo. There's actually a spot that you may visit, and we've been there, and you can actually see the spot in Milan where Ambrose baptized this great doctor and father of the church. So just let me summarize from my book and some other articles real quickly. Augustine headed to Rome looking for fame and fulfillment and even happiness. He didn't find it in Rome, spent only a few short months there, and then he went north to Milan, as we said. At this point, Augustine is a teacher of rhetoric, had his own academy in Milan, a reputation as a teacher, and he also had a number of pupils. He was very successful, and he looked for examples of other good speakers, and he found one in Bishop Ambrose. Okay? So it's very important, the fact that he was attracted to Ambrose because of speaking, and that drew Augustine in. And then eventually during the Easter Vigil on the night between April 24th and 25th in the year 387, Augustine was baptized by Bishop Ambrose. Now, under the cathedral is an excavation site, as I mentioned, of the baptistry from the period of the early church. And you can actually see that place where this happened, the baptism of St. Augustine by St. Ambrose. Phenomenal. Then we move south a little bit to the town of Pavia, which is outside of Milan, about 23 miles. It's very easy to get there. Train service from Milan can get you there in like about 30 minutes, no big deal. Now, the body of St. Augustine is located in Basilica di San Pietro Cel d'Oro. Again, di San Pietro Cel d'Oro. And what's interesting about this church, and I was talking about this yesterday on Annunciation Radio, is when you pull up to this church, you get off the train, you walk in this little piazza, and there's a very, very plain facade. And it's hard to believe with some of these churches that these great teachers of the faith are buried in a church that from the outside looks so simple, but of course on the inside it's very beautiful. But his remains were transferred to Pavia from Rome because they were very worried about vandals. In those days, vandals would look for the relics of the saints and try to find them and steal them quite often. So again, relics were also often moved to different places to protect them, and that's how he ended up in Pavia versus being in Milan or in Rome. Now, if you go back to Rome and the beautiful Basilica of St. Augustine, which was built at the end of the 15th century, dedicated to St. Augustine, they were hoping to house his remains there, but instead, of course, as I mentioned, they moved them to Pavia. So Pavia is worth seeing. Of course, when you're in Milan, you see everything. You see the Duomo. You can see the Last Supper. You can tour the wonderful city itself, which is gorgeous and very important. And then, of course, maybe on your way back, you could go to Pavia for the tomb of St. Augustine, and then head back to Rome after visiting Ostia Antica and visiting the Church of St. Augustine, where St. Monica is buried. And that is a beautiful, beautiful church in Rome. And again, as I was saying yesterday, it's one of those churches that a lot of people miss because it's so close to the Pantheon, which is along a main path that people walk to see the various sites of Italy. But I highly recommend going to St. Augustine's Church. The relics of St. Monica's have been kept there for centuries. And since the 15th century, Pope Martin V desired that her relics be translated to Rome after they moved to Rome after they were, of course, located in Ostia Antica. And so now they are in this beautiful Basilica of St. Augustine in a beautiful sarcophagus made of green marble. That's a wonderful church to visit for Monica's tomb, and there's a Caravaggio in there as well. It's just amazing to walk the footprints of the great saints. So for St. Monica and St. Augustine, you have Rome, Ostia Antica, Milano, and Pavia. All of it's in my book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders. We'll be right back on Wednesday. Stay tuned. I'll bring you a great day. Great to be with you on Catholic Connection. Great to catch up with Father David Marcham. You see him in the trailer of a beautiful film all about Father Patrick Peyton, his cause, up for sainthood. He is venerable right now, and Father David is a vice postulator of the cause for Venerable Father Patrick Peyton, who used to always say, the family that prays together stays together. Father, great to talk to you again. Now we're looking toward the big rally. So tell us all about it, and when is it happening, where is it going to be, and how can we get involved? Thanks for joining us.
Well, you're welcome, and great to be with you, Teresa, and your audience. The Rosary Rally that we're talking about, that we're really looking forward to, is going to be at the University of Notre Dame, Our Lady's University.
Amen.
And it's going to be on, yes, amen. It's going to be on Sunday, September 7th, which not coincidentally is a non-football weekend. So it's cleared for us. And it's going to be at 1:30 in the afternoon on Bond Quad. Beautiful setting. If any of you have ever visited the University of Notre Dame, you know it's a beautiful campus, and this is just a perfect site for it. So we're really excited about it, and we're happy to talk to you and your listeners about it.
How many people are you expecting, Father, do you think? And how big of a crowd can you handle there?
Now that's in the logistics section. I'm going to plead a little ignorance on this, but I think we can handle a pretty sizable crowd. It's an outdoor venue, if you can imagine a college quadrangle.
Yeah.
So we'd be talking in the thousands.
Yeah.
We would love to have in the thousands. And I will say that I've spoken to Craig Dyke and Father Charlie McCoy, and they said parking will be no problem. We've got lots of lots. As I said, it's not a football weekend or anything like that. So we're well prepared. We've been working with the University of Notre Dame events and planning group, who put on obviously major sports events, concerts, etc. So we're dealing with the pros, and they've reassured us that we can handle the crowds.
Why is something like this so important? Why does it make such a statement asking for Our Lady's intercession?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Catholics we know it's our Blessed Mother who leads us to her Son Jesus. And this is certainly what Father Peyton preached and promoted about in relation to family life. That's where we're really centered. We all come from families. Some families are still local to one another. Other families have had to move. Other families have gone home to God. And at times, sadly, at times, families have disagreements, can become estranged, or even just totally not speaking to one another anymore. Mm-hmm. So what we want to do is to reignite family rosary prayer by giving people the experience of coming together as families, but also the bigger family, the church family, to have this experience that inspires them to pick up the rosary again, or if they are praying it, to pray it more frequently with their family on a deeper level. I think that's one of the things that we hope to bring out is the depth and the beauty of the rosary.
So during the rally, I mean, will you be taping this? Because I think this would be something awesome to be put on the internet so people could see, because they have thousands of people together praying the rosary. I mean, that just gives you chills just in general. But the power of this, with so many voices asking for the intercession of Our Lady together in one location.
Absolutely. So before I answer that question, I just want to say, so on one level, this is a homecoming. Mm-hmm. And there'll be people who come to this rally who either went to the University of Notre Dame, or maybe they went to one of the sister school,
Holy Cross
College, mm-hmm. or their good friend, maybe their cousin, if you will, the St. Mary's. And so they're all involved as well. So it's a homecoming, I think, for anyone who went to school right in that area. But I think it's also a homecoming for anyone who maybe has gone to a football game there or some other event there, to be back on campus. And when I say homecoming, I'm also talking about homecoming for us, the members of the body of Christ, to turn to our Blessed Mother. The other thing is that when we call it a rally, mm-hmm. rallies are meant to bring people together for a particular cause. And this cause is to unite under the mantle of Mary, who leads us to Jesus, and to remember that Father Peyton, the reason we're doing it at this particular time is that 75 years ago, he led one of his first rosary rallies right at the University of Notre Dame.
Wow.
So we're, if you will, we are, to steal a little from the fight song, what we're trying to do is to wake up the echoes of our faith that reside deep in our souls. And but to answer your question, yes, we will be recording it. And another thing, we want everyone to come in person, because you know, when you go to a game and you're there in person, or a concert, mm-hmm. it has that extra quality to it, that communal shared experience that we say you can go back to in time. But we will also be streaming it live as well.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, and it's also this is the opportunity for me to say, how do people, find out about the particulars after what I've said is they can go to familyrosary.org, and there they can get updates, directions, plus this rosary video project that we're doing. We're following Father Peyton's model of encouraging people to pray the rosary for the fruitfulness of this, mm-hmm. but also to get people going before they even get to the rally in terms of growing in love of our faith through the rosary.
That's just so powerful. Now, being a media person, I'm thinking of all those people gathering, what that's going to look like, what that would feel like, the sense of it, and to be able to carry, we want people there, but to be able to send that out, Father, that image out online to so many people. I think Father Peyton would have loved that opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're building on what he did and using the modern means, and he was always on the front edge, the leading mm-hmm. edge of using media. So we're trying to follow along that way with our new marketing and communications director, Colin Devine's doing a great job with a number of these aspects of what you're saying.
Mm. We're talking with Father David Marcham, who is the priest that you'll see in the trailer for that beautiful movie about Father Patrick Peyton, and he also is a vice postulator of the cause of Venerable Patrick Peyton. The family that prays together stays together. That's so simple but so true. Well, I want to talk about what it means to be, I know we're going to kind of get away from this here a little bit, but to give people a little bit of background about the cause itself for Venerable Patrick Peyton, because the process to become to the next step, of course, and then the final step of being canonized. It's a long process. Where are we in that process right now, Father?
Yeah, where we are right now, first step is servant of God, and that's when the we call the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints does a preliminary study of the candidate, and they find nothing is in the way, nihil obstat, nothing's in the way of the investigation. So that's your first stage, is servant of God. And then they review every bit of your life, from the people who knew you when you were at your youngest to the very end of your life, and all your works. And if they find in all their studies that you lived a life of super heroic virtue, meaning basically better than we can see in most of our population, and a life of holiness, true holiness, then the Church will, in this case, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, declared
Let's
Father
hold on
Peyton
1 second,
venerable.
Father. I'm sorry I asked you too closely during the break, but we'll pick it up when we come back. Our guests are the David Marcham, Vice Postulator for the cause of Venerable Patrick Peyton. We're talking about really two aspects in terms of the life of Father Patrick Peyton. The fact that there's going to be a big Rosary Rally at Notre Dame University, perfect place for this, coming up the weekend of September 7th. We'll give you more information and where you can just check it out and all the details and that. And also about the cause of Venerable Patrick Peyton, because, again, Father David is the Vice Postulator for his cause. And you were saying that, okay, so this is the first step. There's servant of God. It can take some, I was talking about St. Pius X the other day, who was canonized rather quickly, I guess, in terms of, church timing, because he died in, I think it was 1914. He was canonized in 1954. So, what's that, 40 years? That's not that long in church time. But sometimes it can take a lot longer than that, right, Father?
Absolutely. It's all in God's providence.
Mm-hmm.
That's he knows the exact time, and he also knows each step of the way unfolds a little more of the candidate for sainthood's life, and we need to labor at it. And when I say labor, there's of course the canonical work that a postulator and vice postulator and the actor does, who sponsors the cause. There's all that work, but then there's the wonderful work where we dialogue with people who knew the candidate for sainthood and the people that review their works from a theological and a historical context within the church. And so when I first started in 2007 working on his cause, I was very much, okay, we've got to get this done by this date and this date. And we do have to follow a certain flow. We can't be complacent. But at a certain point, it clicked with me after, I think, maybe the 100th question of when will Father Peyton be venerable? That was back in the early days. I remember thinking, you know what? God has got this planned out. We each have a role to play, and so we do with faith that this is going to be at the perfect time, in God's time. So what happens after someone is servant of God, then they study their lives, as I said, from the very beginning to the end, all aspects of it. And it's quite a lengthy process, and causes for sainthood can go on for quite a while, as you say. Some are quicker, some are slower, but I trust God in how that works. But what they look at is to see if the person, the candidate, lived a life of super heroic virtue. So we think about, okay, the virtues of faith, hope, and charity. We think about patience and temperance and all the virtues. But that this candidate was well beyond what we'd say a good person is, a true example for people to emulate in their lives as it applies to them. And then, combined with that, is the sanctity of life. Did this person live for God in the entirety of their life, not just in a part-time way, but throughout every aspect of their life? Was it directed to God, and were they in full communion with God as they did it? Understanding, of course, that even the saints had to go to confession, like we do. But what the saints show us is that when they fell, there was no hesitation. They turned to God for forgiveness. He gave them the grace of through absolution and penance, and then they were strengthened to grow in virtue and holiness. And that's what the Church declared when Pope Francis in 2017 decreed that servant of God, Father Patrick Peyton, was now going to be Venerable Patrick Peyton.
Mm-hmm. So the next is beatification, become a blessed, and then canonization, God willing, right?
Correct. And each one requires a medical miracle and that only occurs when the candidate is the only person that someone asks for their intercession. You can't hedge your bet and have 2 or 3 or 50. It has to be, you have that much faith in that particular candidate.
What is it like for you to work on his cause?
Well, I can honestly say it has been a tremendous spiritual journey, because when I began, I only knew Father Peyton's name. That's all I knew. So for me, it was like being a detective, a spiritual investigator, looking at the life of this priest who was revered, right here at the Father Peyton Center and around the world. But I came at it from the standpoint of my background, which was in healthcare and physical therapy and research and teaching. So I just dove in with an objective faith in God, but still wanting to, okay, who was this person? What did they do? What do people say about them? And the letters that I got, the emails, the stories I heard over the phone, all started to get me to think, wow, what a gift to be able to be inspired by this priest, this holy priest, to learn from him, and in some ways to try to emulate him in my own way. We're all unique, but to emulate him and to be willing to take chances for the sake of God and his people.
It must be pretty humbling as a fellow priest, right, to look at his life. And you look at some of the old films and the video, well, I would say they're a video now, but you look at some of the old film clips and the people, the thousands of people, and his passion in praying with them and talking to them. It seems like it's so important that this is all happening now, given the problems in our world and given what's happening, for example, in the Middle East, which seems to be so much more heightened than it was even, a few years ago, the situation with Russia, things Our Lady talked about in Fatima. I mean, God's timing is always perfect.
It is, and of course, everyone knows Father Peyton's expression, the family that prays together stays together. Mm-hmm. I'm humbled just by virtue of God calling me to be a priest. I didn't see it coming. I was on a different life track, thinking about marriage and my career in physical therapy, and for me it was so humbling just to be called to be a priest. You go through 6 years of training and formation. It is extremely humbling. But what I got from studying Father Peyton's life was he was a humble man, and he was a holy man, but he was willing to take chances in all areas and to ask anyone for their help to further the mission of helping families spiritually through family rosary prayer. And so for me, I've done, like we're doing now, so many different things that I would never think that God would want me to do or I had the qualifications to do. But Father Peyton gave me the courage to say, okay, Lord, if this is what you want me to do, I need your grace, and I'll give it my best shot. I know you'll be there with me, as well as I know Father Peyton's helping me along the way, too.
So, Father, let me ask you, given your background in healthcare and your training, how do you think God is using that now? Because God never wastes his time. I spent 20 years in the secular media before I came over to Catholic media, and I see now that had nothing to do with me being a star on secular TV. It was all in radio. It was all training for, being in Catholic media. How do you think God is using your training and your background to make a difference here?
Well, the most obvious was when it comes to hearing people stories and asking, like, was this a medical miracle? I do have the background to read medical charts and to analyze research related to different diseases and healings and spontaneous healings and all that. And I have a comfort level in talking with doctors and nurses and translating from the medical to the layman's terminology. I think the other part, too, is that as a physical therapist, I heard so many stories from people. And that's one of the things I love about being vice postulator and guild director is I get to hear people's stories, and then I get to share them. And And that's what I try to do as a physical therapist was one person's story could inspire another, to give them hope, to give them a direction. And so, and then even as I think too about my family, I grew up in a family that just lived the faith very naturally. The Irish side, the Shea side, my mom's side, very much into storytelling and history. And I think all those things, I can see how the Lord was preparing me for this particular part of my priesthood, and I'm just so grateful for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we look back in our lives, we think it's for something else, and God's like, nah, I got another idea, and it's going to work out just even better than you ever imagined, right? Because He's God and we're not. Well, I'm looking at a website. I want to make sure this is the correct one, familyrosary.org, where it gives folks all the details for the rally on September 7th. That's a correct resource, right? familyrosary.org.
Yeah, and just want to encourage people, when they get to that website, there's a part that says you're invited, and it says click here. You click there, and then it allows you to sign up to get photos in advance, maps, the Rosary video project that we're working on right now. You can work your way through it. The other part I want to mention is that for people who have never been to a Rosary Rally, you might want to, just a bunch of people come in and you start in the name of the Father and the Son. We do, of course, pray the Rosary with meditations. There'll be different groups represented, but there's going to be music. It's going to be very festive. We're very pleased that our keynote speaker will be the founder of Hallow. Alex Jones will be speaking there.
He's from my parish in the Archdiocese of Detroit.
All right. Very good.
Yeah,
Well,
I've spoken to him on the phone before. Well, I've interviewed him before, but he's great. We're very proud of him from our parish, St. Joan of Arc in St. Clair Shores, Michigan. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I'm a hometown proud guy from Quincy and Sacred Heart, so I can appreciate that. Yeah, so we're really looking. I believe that the Holy Spirit, our Lord, our Blessed Mother, is going to bless us with a true renewal. As we talk about today's saint, renew all things in Christ. Mm-hmm. I would add, renew all things in Christ and our Blessed Mother at this Rosary Rally.
Yeah. I think Mama Mary is going to be there big time. I mean, this is her place, right? Notre Dame. The university.
She's right up there on the Golden Dome, looking down.
The Golden Dome. Yep. I've been to Notre Dame. I didn't go there. I went to a public university, but it's just very, very powerful when any group comes together in prayer. But the Rosary, I'm so glad to see, Father, this movement back toward the Rosary, aren't you?
Teresa, I am, and so I'm seeing. I'm not a prophet, but I think I can see dots being connected. So we had the National Eucharistic Congress that has boosted interest in Eucharistic processions and adoration. Now we're seeing an upswing in the Rosary and Rosary pilgrimages and rallies. And I'm going to make a prediction. I think the next dot we're going to see is the fruit of these two coming together is an increase in people returning both to Mass, but I'm going to say probably a re-emergence of the sacrament of reconciliation.
Oh,
I think this is all moving in that direction through God's plan. And I think, going back to the family, if families can pray together, they can pray with each other and for each other, that's going to help reestablish peace in our homes and a real sense of hope and joy.
It just it just does something to, how do I say this? The whole temperament in your house, the way you relate to one another, it just sets a beautiful stage. Like in the morning when my husband and I try to do the readings together every day, we've been doing that since we came back to the church, and now he's a deacon, so sometimes he has to go and celebrate, help out with the Mass during the morning, so we can't do it every day. But just sitting down together and doing the readings together, or we pray the Rosary together, especially on the road when we were in Italy, first for protection from the crazy fellow Italians, because the way they drive. Mama Mary, please cover us, as we're driving along the Italian freeways. But just praying that together is just, I don't know how to describe it, Father. There's just something about it as a couple. Your whole demeanor toward each other changes.
Right, and that's part of what we want people to. We want people to have an experience at the rally so they can take it home, because it's true. When we as families turn to God and our Blessed Mother, we stop looking at each other as critically, and we look to them for help. Mm-hmm. And as you say, that changes the whole tone on a psychological level, sure, but really it's on a level of grace.
Father, always great to catch up with you. Love interviewing you. Thank you for your beautiful work, and we look forward to the big rally coming up on September 7th at 1:30 at the University of Notre Dame. Go to familyrosary.org, and remember, the family that prays together stays together. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning in to Catholic Connection. Again, we are coming to you from the annual EWTN Global Catholic Radio Conference. Pretty exciting, and they have all kinds of different sessions going on. Today we are doing a retreat at the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception. Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers will be among the speakers. I just wish he had a little bit more energy. I'm kidding. He is so energetic. I love his talks. I've been blessed to speak with him at various conferences and make sure that when he is speaking that I'm in there listening because he's fabulous. All right, so we are going to be at the Immaculate Conception Basilica in D.C., and then tomorrow we'll be live from the radio conference. Friday we'll give you a special edition of Catholic Connection as I head back to Detroit before heading out to Italy. I'm all over the place. I don't know what's going on. I just try to keep myself centered on Christ so I don't get lost. Anyway, I digress. Coming up in the second hour of Catholic Connection, I think you're going to really enjoy this interview. We're re-airing it. It is powerful. It is with Father Bill Miscamble. He's one of the contributors to a beautiful book, and I mean a gorgeous book about the amazing George Cardinal Pell. So many stories, incredible stories, and so many phenomenal contributors to this book published by our friends at Ignatius Press. So that's coming up in the second hour. And again, it's Father Bill Miscamble, Remembering George Cardinal Pell. And he talks about how much he got to know the Cardinal and also his contributions, not only to his native land of Australia, but to the Church and to the world. More Catholic Connection coming your way on a Wednesday. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And welcome to the second hour on a Wednesday of Catholic Connection here on EWTN Radio Extra. Good to be with you on a Wednesday, the feast of the great Saint Monica, the mother of Saint Augustine. Oh my goodness. And tomorrow is a feast day of St. Augustine. Very exciting. I just love our saints. And of course, these two are powerhouses. And St. Monica, her feast day celebrated today, a memorial day within the Catholic Church honoring the mother of St. Augustine, who is known for her perseverance in prayer and for the conversion of her son to Christianity. Now, think about the impact that a praying mom has had on not only the church, but the world. And I think St. Monica is such a great help to so many of us, whether it be our own children or whether it be other family members, as an encouragement just to keep going to the Lord and being persistent in your prayer. She's famous for her lifelong prayers for the conversion of her son Augustine, which eventually led to his conversion to Christianity. And of course, he became one of the great teachers and leaders of the early church, originally from North Africa. And there's so many great stories about the two of them and how she was so persistent, not only in her prayer, but in following him. Not only did she pray for him and remind him of how important it was to get his life together, because he was a brilliant man, he was a great orator, and he was experimenting in all these different religions and became very knowledgeable about several of them, and just kept putting off the idea of Christianity. As a matter of fact, there's a prayer, Lord, make me holy, but not yet. And so if you know anything about St. Augustine, you know about the fact that he lived quite the promiscuous life. And I don't have time to go into all the details, but it's just beautiful when you go to Milan, for example, and you learn about St. Ambrose, because Monica sought the help of St. Ambrose, and he eventually was also very, very significant in the conversion of St. Augustine, because Ambrose was a great teacher, and he was very impressed by his speaking abilities and the arguments that he put forth. And you go to Milan and you hear all about that. You can see actually the baptismal font below the church where St. Augustine was baptized by St. Ambrose, and it's just fascinating. But then down near Rome, And I was talking about this earlier in the program in our Italy's Shrines and Wonders segment. There is an area known as Ostia Antica that is very significant in the lives of both of these saints. As a matter of fact, that's where St. Monica shows up and basically surprises Augustine. There she is in Ostia. He's trying to get away from her. He's trying to run away from God, and she ends up following him there. So there's a lot of history in both Milan and also in Rome and outside of Rome in Ostia Antica, which actually is a beautiful, as I mentioned earlier, archaeological site. It's a mini Pompeii, and a lot of people don't pay any attention to it, which is a shame. You can do a self-guided tour, but I would really recommend, we did a self-guided tour years ago, which was fine, but I wish I would have had a guide because there's so much there in terms of the city of Ostia, which used to be right on the water. But because of the changes in the land and the topography over many centuries, it's now more inland, but it's well preserved in terms of the houses, the theaters. You go there, there's amphitheaters. It's quite something. So it is also very strongly connected to both St. Monica and St. Augustine, whose feast we are celebrating this week. Well, we continue our visit here in the D.C. area for the radio conference, EWTN radio conference. After the show today, heading over to the Basilica of the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception for a beautiful retreat. And then tomorrow we'll be broadcasting live from the radio conference, which is going to be a lot of fun. And during the radio conference, they have a lot of different sessions to help radio stations stay on top of things technology-wise, content-wise, and we bring our experts to the table. We have so many amazing people that work at EWTN who can advise the folks who are running affiliates. Maybe they're starting a new station. We have broadcast lawyers that help them. We have marketing people that help them. It's quite wonderful how EWTN brings all these experts to the table during the radio conference. Of course, they make them available year-round as affiliates, but they do presentations, they talk one-on-one, and there's also a nice display of vendors offering different ideas on different religious items, but also on products in the business in terms of technology. Just really interesting to see where the business has gone over the years. But anyway, we're at the radio conference, and I will be speaking tomorrow on Thursday. Looking forward to that. I'm part of a panel with Annie Banani, Anna Mitchell from the Sunrise Morning Show, and Matt Swaim and Ace McKay from EWTN, and we're talking about Ready, Set, Show. So there you go. We'll tell you all about that on Friday. Okay, second hour of the program today, we're going to be re-airing an interview with an amazing priest, Father Bill Miscamble, who's one of the contributors to this beautiful new book from our friends at Ignatius Press, all about remembering George Cardinal Pell. I loved Cardinal Pell, thought he was amazing, had the opportunity to interview him more than once and also meet him in person. So this was a special interview for me. We're re-airing it for you in the second hour this morning, and I do think you will like it. Alrighty then, we will right now on a Wednesday morning check the weather and the news for you. The National Weather Service says extreme heat is waning over the Pacific Northwest, but dry, gusty winds and isolated thunderstorms. Dry thunderstorms will bring critical fire weather still to that part of the country and Intermountain West. Heavy rain, meanwhile, and thunderstorms continuing across portions of the Great Basin, Rockies, and central southern parts of the plains into the Ozarks. That's a look at your weather on a Wednesday. Now let's check the news here on a Wednesday morning on EWTN. In a joint message released August 26, the Latin and the Greek Orthodox Patriarchs of Jerusalem announcing or denouncing the evacuation of Gaza City in the face of an imminent Israel operation as a death sentence. The text stating that in light of the repeated announcements of a massive military mobilization and perhaps for an imminent offensive by the Israeli army to take control of Gaza, the first evacuation orders have been issued for civilians, including Christians, to be relocated in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. They urgently called on the international community to act for an end of this senseless and what they called destructive war and for the return of the missing people and the Israeli hostages. Catholic News Agency also reporting this morning that the President's Department of Health and Human Services is warning states and American territories they must remove references to gender ideology from K-12 education materials or they will lose major federal funding. HHS sending letters dated August 26 to 40 states and D.C., as well as 5 territories that they say any state territory that fails to end the promotion of gender ideology in its implementation of the Personal Responsibility Education Program, or PREP, within the next 60 days will lose that PREP funding. The states and territories cumulatively receive more than $81.3 million annually from PREP, with most taking in a few $1 million and others receiving several $100,000 in funding. Meanwhile, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. is set to announce the causes of autism, and he says he'll do that by next month. The secretary discussing his intentions to reveal the causes of autism during a cabinet meeting held by the president yesterday.
We're finding certain interventions now that are clearly, almost certainly causing autism.
Kennedy has previously vowed to find the cause of what he calls growing rates of autism, saying it's an epidemic that dwarfs the COVID epidemic. He has long claimed that environmental factors or vaccines are likely culprits behind the rising rate of autism diagnoses, and the department's upcoming announcement is also expected to address possible ways of combating the identified causes. Rory O'Neill tells us that a new executive order signed by President Trump will establish specialized units in the National Guard.
The Defense Department is now under orders to create guard units specifically trained to tame civil unrest. Monday's order comes as the president considers deploying guard troops to cities like Chicago and Baltimore as part of a crackdown on crime. President Trump declared an emergency in Washington and used his authority to take over the police there temporarily. Some local leaders are pushing back, saying the president doesn't have the same authority in their communities. I'm Rory O'Neill.
And the president, meanwhile, says he's going to impose substantial tariffs on countries that do not remove digital taxes. William Denzel reports in a post on Truth Social yesterday. Trump also says he will restrict chip exports to those nations as well.
The EU has the ability to fine major tech players if deemed to not be in compliance with regulations such as the Digital Markets Act. Meta and Apple are among those accused of such violations, with the US saying that these rules amount to censorship.
Countries that pose digital taxes argue that companies such as Amazon operate within their borders, taking huge profits from citizens while paying nothing to the government. And the president also saying he's not worried about new legal threats from the Federal Reserve Board Governor Lisa Cook after taking the unprecedented step of letting her go.
She seems to have had an infraction, and she can't have an infraction, especially that infraction, because she's in charge of, if you think about it, mortgages, and we need people that are 100% above board, and it doesn't seem like she was.
Her removal following a Justice Department's criminal investigation into the board governor after she was accused of making false statements of home mortgage applications by the Federal Housing Finance Agency Director, Bill Pulte. And Texas lawmakers passing a plan to overhaul the way the students are tested in public schools in that state.
It reforms our Texas assessment program and strengthens the state's accountability system.
State Rep Brad Buckley is saying a once-a-year assessment called the STAR test will now be replaced by 3 separate tests. They'll be given at the start, the middle, and the end of the year. The goal, he says, is to track student progress. Matt Madison tells us consumer confidence dipped this month.
The Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index fell by more than a point from the July reading as consumers became less optimistic about the economy. The monthly survey noted concerns about tariffs and higher prices, including food and groceries, rose again in August. Purchasing plans for homes remained stable, while discretionary spending for dining out, entertainment, and vacations were all down. I'm at Mattinson.
It's a Wednesday morning. More Catholic Connection coming your way, and we are in the D.C. area for the Catholic Radio Conference. Stay tuned. Hope you're having a beautiful Wednesday, middle of summer. I love summer. It goes by way too quickly. I already saw yesterday, can you believe it? Back to school commercials. We just celebrated 4th of July, for crying out loud. And then my friend last week, Chuck Gatica, before we came home, Chuck was on talking about the situation in Texas and climate and all that stuff because he's an experienced meteorologist. During the break, he was telling me, Halloween stuff is already out in Michigan. Stop! Slow down. Dolce far niente. Anyhow, beautiful first reading today that is such a way to really examine our hearts. Are we being open to God's call in our lives? Or do we think that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, God can't possibly be calling me to do something for him. All right, so let's take a look at this reading. This is from Exodus, okay? Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. Leading the flock across the desert, he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There an angel of the Lord appeared to him in fire, flaming out of a bush. As he looked on, he was surprised to see that bush, though on fire, was not consumed. So Moses decided, I must go over to look at this remarkable sight and see why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw him coming over to look at it more closely, God called out to him from the bush, Moses, Moses. He answered, Here I am. God said, Come no nearer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I am the God of your father, he continued, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. The cry of the children of Israel has reached me, and I have truly noted that the Egyptians are oppressing them. Come now, I will send you to Pharaoh to lead my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and lead the children of Israel out of Egypt? He answered, I will be with you, and this shall be your proof that it is I who have sent you. When you bring my people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this very mountain. Wow. Imagine that. So if you know the history of Moses, right, in terms of him being raised by an Egyptian, and also, of course, trying to defend a Jew who was being beaten by an Egyptian, and eventually kills the Egyptian who is attacking the Jew, and he runs away. And God is still choosing him. Just as God chose David, who was an adulterer and a murderer. And in Scripture we see God calling David, of course after he is remorseful, a man after my own heart. How many times, maybe because of our own insecurities or past sin, that we doubt that God is calling us to do something? And we forget the words from Exodus chapter 3:12 that we just heard, I will be with you. Or the Great Commission, and know that I am with you until the ends of the ages, as the Lord tells us, right? As Jesus tells us. Go and preach the gospel north, south, east, and west, and know that I will be with you. The same message throughout Scripture, Old Testament and New Testament. Let me share with you before some comments from yours truly this beautiful reflection from Word Among Us, WAU.org. It starts out with that scripture verse from Exodus, I will be with you. Put yourself in Moses' sandals for a moment. Surely he had tended the sheep through all kinds of weather, over different terrains, and during various times and seasons. He knew the natural order of things, and in that natural order a bush that is on fire will eventually burn out. Imagine his surprise when he came upon a burning bush that was not burning up. Then imagine how much more surprised he must have been when he heard the very voice of God speaking from the midst of this bush. It would be easy for us, as it was for Moses, to be in awe of this scene. If the story ended here, we would have more than enough evidence that God is a worker of miracles. But what God does next is even more miraculous. And again, you can find this on the wonderful devotional website from Word Among Us, WAU.org. Just as God revealed his presence and power through the burning bush, he promised that he would manifest his power even more so through Moses. He would use this man to deliver his message of liberation to the Israelite people who were slaves in Egypt, and to the mighty Pharaoh himself. And if Pharaoh refused to let the people go, then the power of God would burn in and through Moses to change his mind. Moses himself will become a kind of burning bush, yet not consumed bush. Moses was hesitant at first, very insecure about his ability to speak publicly, and he protested that God must have chosen the wrong man. Isn't that funny how we doubt God? God speaks to us and then we say, hey, you're wrong. I know you're God and everything, but you can't be thinking this. But God promised to be with him and to work through him. Eventually, Moses said yes, and the God of the universe, who can do anything he wants, began to work through this hesitant, fugitive shepherd. Surely, the meditation goes on, our God is a worker of miracles. Not only does he have power over the created universe, but he also has a power to work in our hearts. It is one thing to set a bush on fire without destroying it, but it is another thing, and I love this, altogether, to set a heart on fire with unyielding confidence in an unseen God. But that's exactly what the Lord did. What would it look like for your heart to be set on fire? Greater joy, confidence in hard situations, perhaps an eagerness to share the good news. The possibilities are endless. And these meditations on Word Among Us always close with a prayer, Lord, come and set my heart on fire with love for you. And I think there's so many lessons, not only in this reflection and meditation, but also in the first reading. Do we allow our hearts to be set on fire? Or do we put God in a little bit of a box and say, well, if I just do this and keep my emotions intact and don't get too excited about things and just live a good life, don't commit any mortal sins or anything, make sure I'm receiving the sacraments and going to Mass, everything will be fine. Well, okay. You're trying in some sense to do the right thing, and that's good. But for many of us, there comes a point in our life where God does ask us to take a leap of faith. And we hold back, and I'm speaking from personal experience. We don't think we're good enough, or perhaps it's a combination of not thinking we're good enough, but also thinking that if I let go of what I have now, this particular way of life, maybe a particular job, I'm not sure what's going to happen on the other side. So we doubt ourselves, and we doubt that God is talking to us. Not that we doubt that God is God, but we think, well, I must be misunderstanding what God is trying to tell me. Or maybe we say, well, surely God is making a mistake. He means another person. And it's a process of discernment. And all you need to do is to keep moving toward God. Take a step. One step after the other. I love one of my favorite quotes from Mother Angelica, our foundress at EWTN. Faith is 1 foot in the air, 1 foot on the ground, and a queasy feeling in the stomach. Certainly, God is not going to ask you to let go of all your responsibilities. And this is where the clarity will come in. If you have a family, if you have responsibilities, it's not going to be of God if He's going to tell you to abandon your family. That's not going to happen. I've actually had people tell me things like that. Well, I'm just going to walk away and eventually. No. If you are, your marriage, your family, relationship with God, your family commitment is huge. But God may be calling you to something different in your life. Maybe it's an entirely new vocation. Maybe it's just something a little bit less daunting, such as maybe leading a Bible study or volunteering at an abortion as an abortion counselor on the sidewalks, or volunteering at a pregnancy resource center, and maybe you don't feel qualified. But as we said at the top of the hour, God is famous for not calling the qualified, but qualifying the called. Okay? Now, there are people, right, in history and in the church that are perfect for the positions for which they've been chosen. Let's look at Pope Leo, right? But for many of us, he calls us to something that we don't really expect to do. And then he qualifies us in that process. As long as we have a heart on fire with love for him and we say yes, with that 1 foot in the air, 1 foot on the ground, and even, yes, that queasy feeling in the stomach. Let your heart be on fire for the Lord. He won't disappoint. Hope you're having a beautiful day. It is a Tuesday. It's the feast of St. Francis de Chantal. It is August 12, 2025, and we appreciate your listenership here on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network, which means we cover the entire world and the church for you, including our great leaders. And one of the greatest, I think, in our time was the late, great Cardinal Pell. I just admired him and respected him so much. Beautiful book, Remembering George Cardinal Pell. With us to talk about this beautiful book and this amazing man of God, Father Bill Miscamble. Father, thank you so much for joining us. And my producer Tom and I were talking before the show how much so many people just loved him and admire him. And it's great to really talk about him because what a witness he is for us. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Teresa, for having me on and giving me the opportunity to speak about Cardinal Pell. And as you say, he was a great man of the church who deeply loved Christ and was a person who gave encouragement to so many others, despite some of the challenges he experienced, particularly in that latter part of his life.
Yeah. So tell us your connection with the good Cardinal.
Okay, well, I am a contributor. I want to make clear, Teresa, I'm not an intimate friend of the Cardinal. I knew him in the last 20 years of his life. Of all things, I first met him in 2004, I think, at a luncheon that Cardinal George hosted in Chicago. What a privilege it was to see those two great churchmen, Cardinal George Pell, Cardinal Francis George, together. They were on the same wavelength. They were truly inspired by St. John Paul II. And so I met him there. And then over the years, I teach at Notre Dame. I'm Australian heritage, but I would be back in Australia to visit my elderly parents, and I would always swing by to see him, etc. And my last visit with him was in 2018. It was between his first trial and his second trial. And I corresponded with him during his imprisonment and stayed in touch after he was, of course, released. So I had a sort of a friendship. We had Cardinal Pell, had such an enormous interest in education at every level. My own interest, of course, is in Catholic higher education, and he was of enormous support and encouragement with my own interests. So that's something of my contact with him.
Yeah. Now, the book that they were mentioning this morning, along with our interview, is Remembering George Cardinal Pell, Recollections of a Great Man of the Church. And there are a number of contributors to this beautiful book, including George Weigel, Cardinal Mueller, oh my gosh, Joanna Bogle, so many wonderful people, Cardinal Dolan. What does it mean to you to have this book available to people now, Father, do you think?
Well, I should inform your listeners that the book was compiled by a wonderful theologian, you probably know her well, Teresa, Professor Tracy Rowland, who teaches at the University of Notre Dame, Australia. She's actually an expert in the theology and thought of Benedict XVI. But Tracy set about to get, I think there are over 30 of us who had some contact with Cardinal Pell over the course of his life. So some folks, like his brother David, is a contributor, and they've known him all of his life from when he was growing up in Ballarat and was a champion football player and all that. Folks may know some of those details. Pell was a great athlete when he was young. All the way through to folks, as you mentioned, Cardinal Mueller's homily is in there. Wonderful reminiscences by Cardinal Dolan. Cardinal Dolan is so terrific. And also Cardinal Collins from Toronto has a terrific piece in there. But then a whole variety of other folks, including people in public life. Pell was very close to the former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott, and Abbott's reflection leads off the piece because Tracy Rowland assembled them just alphabetically, and so Abbott leads off, and it's a terrific reflection about Pell's encouragement for him to engage public life. And there are all kinds of other contributors, priests, sisters, lay men and women. So I encourage listeners who want to get a perspective of Cardinal Pell from just a variety of perspectives. I should add, I think all of them, I've read the book carefully. They're all very well written, very engaging. And you can pick up the book and read someone's contribution, like you mentioned George Weigel, who knew Cardinal Pell and was so close to him. You can read their pieces and just get another glimpse, another angle on this great cardinal in the church.
I want to go back, Father, to something you said about Cardinal Pell and his engaging in terms of the issues and in the church and helping people understand that we have a responsibility to do just that lovingly. So many people, and I think maybe the tide is turning a little bit on that, are afraid to engage outside of the four walls of their parish, thinking that they will, of course, living in our cancel culture. And certainly our Lord said, if they persecuted me, they will persecute you, right? And no servant is greater than his master. But it is so important for us to take our faith outside the church, not with, proselytizing and hitting people over the head with the Bible and the catechism, but to let people know about Jesus, because my husband is a deacon, and that dismissal line that he says, go in peace, glorifying the Lord with your life. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do when we leave Mass.
Absolutely, Teresa. Of course, you've spoken so well there. Cardinal Pell would endorse everything that you have just said. This is why he was so concerned about education at every level. He wanted to reject sort of privatized Catholicism, and he wanted to push back against sort of beige, wimpish Catholicism. And he wanted a well-educated laity who would go forth and not just directly in public life, but that's why he was so concerned with Catholic universities in Australia, Australian Catholic University, University of Notre Dame, Australia. He wanted to train people in the professions, in the law, in medicine, in nursing, in teaching, in business, etc., so that they would go forth out into those professions and, as you say, not proselytizing with necessarily a Bible in the hand, although there's nothing wrong with having a Bible in your hand, but going forth by their witness to show what it is that they value and how to bring gospel values into the world. I think one of the things that Pell was so noted for in Australia was because he was such a public figure himself and willing to engage the great issues of the day. And of course, this brought him pushback and criticism from the sort of secular progressive elite who hated the fact that he would get on television programs and debate people, etc. But Pell witnessed himself what he wanted to encourage Catholics to do.
And he did it so well. We're talking with Father Bill Miscamble, and the book is Remembering George Cardinal Pell, published by our friends at Ignatius. Of course, you can find it there at their website, also on our EWTN religious catalog. And I love the fact that there's so many different people, Father, and we'll talk more a little bit about this when we come back. Because as you said, it's a kind of book, and I received my copy a couple of weeks ago. You could just pick it up, open it up, read one chapter, and then go back to it and really kind of think and, meditate on what a particular person who may have known him, in a different way. I think that's very, very important to have different perspectives from different people and walks of life, because it shows the impact that he had on so many different people. We'll continue our conversation with Father Bill Miscamble on the book Remembering George Cardinal Pell, and just the wonderful, wonderful, amazing holy life. And even during his persecution, he made such a difference. And when he was in jail, think about all the people he impacted. His writings, his using that time to grow more in faith and to pray. Amazing man of God. Remembering George Cardinal Pell. We'll be right back. It's a wonderful book to grab, and we still have summer left, folks. It's still on the calendar here in the U.S. of A. Remembering George Cardinal Pell, a beautiful book from our friends at Ignatius Press, one of the contributors with us this morning, Father Bill Miscamble. Of course, many other amazing people in addition to Father. We have Cardinal Timothy Dolan, who is always, he's just got such a larger-than-life personality as well. Oh, so many others, George Weigel, many other people, Sister Mary Grace from the Sisters of Life who contributed. So get a copy of this book, Remembering George Cardinal Pell. Father, we were chatting during the break about, despite his suffering and the total miscarriage of justice in terms of him being incarcerated, his witness during that time, during those trials, it was huge, was it not?
It certainly was, Teresa. I sometimes pull off my own shelf. He maintained a journal when he was in prison. In fact, you may have addressed it at a previous show, but his prison journal reveals his thinking and his prayer and his attitude during those over 400 days when he was in solitary confinement, a terrible, terrible miscarriage of justice, as we know. But he never succumbed to anger or bitterness or whatever, never began to think poorly, etc., of anyone. He saw his suffering as a kind of redemptive. He offered it up to the Lord for victims of sexual abuse, for victims. He was praying for his fellow prisoners who were in that maximum security prison with him for a time. And I encourage your listeners to read Remembering Cardinal Pell. But if they are led on from that book to reading more about Pell, I encourage them to pick up particularly volume 1 of his prison journals, published also by Ignatius Press. It's just terrific reading of a faith-filled man who is deeply in love with Christ and the church. And, he was a scapegoat. The terrible miscarriage of justice. He was a scapegoat, but he showed deep courage, and his courage then encouraged others. So a marvelous, marvelous witness. We've seen folks, be imprisoned and witness in a similar way. Think of great saints, Thomas More and all the rest. I put Cardinal Pell in that category.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the fact that he left us those writings, I mean, this is good for someone not only maybe who has a family member who has been treated poorly or maybe, God forbid, another miscarriage of justice in some way, shape, or form, but it shows you, I think, each individual how when you do go through suffering, how we have this beautiful teaching in the Catholic Church of redemptive suffering. And we need to, I think, tap into that in terms of, no, we don't ask for suffering. We're not like, at least I'm not, I don't think I ever will be, like the great saints, my patron, St. Teresa of Avila, used to ask for suffering. It's like, I don't think many of us are there. But when it does happen, what do we do with it? Okay, Lord, what am I going to do? This situation really stinks, but what can I do to make a difference here with this suffering?
Exactly. It's a terrific insight that Pell's example can encourage and support us. Of course, we have the Lord's great example, and Pell was drawing nourishment and support from that. But Cardinal Pell shows us that even in our own time, various things happen. We all face setbacks and suffering. How to deal with it, he gives us classic guidance.
It is interesting to see where the world is at this point. There's been somewhat of a shift in the United States in terms of people feeling more open about their faith and being able to express it more clearly and strongly. Australia, and you're from there, so you know your motherland, has had a lot of issues in terms of just going off the rails and maybe even further than where the United States went in terms of swinging way to the left. What do you think he'd say about your situation in Australia right now, Father?
Cardinal Pell deeply loved Australia, and he wanted the best. He wanted the best for Australia. But I think he would be perturbed and worried about the recent developments. And of course, this is what he was seeking to combat. First, during the great years when he was Archbishop of Melbourne, then when he was Archbishop of Sydney. And so he was engaging in all the public debates, etc. But one of the things that I must make clear is he was never down. He was never, woe is us, the situation's so bad. No, he was, how can I encourage others to engage in the fight? And this way he had a great love and concern for young people. And you may recall, Teresa, he was able in 2008, World Youth Day was held in Sydney, and he saw that as an occasion to deepen and rouse the Christian faith of young people. And that, I think, is still paying benefits in the Australian church. But particularly in the state of Victoria, where he was tried, the sort of secular progressive left is sadly quite dominant. And there's a journalist who writes in the book, Andrew Bolt, who, by the way, is a non-believer. Bolt writes about Cardinal Pell's efforts to encourage him to, take the Christian faith as part of his own life. But Bolt speaks of how Pell was such a figure standing in contrast to that secular progressivism that's sort of dominant there at the moment. So I think Pell would say to folks, hey, things may not look so great, but don't give up the fight. Keep engaging, keep praying, keep working. That would be his attitude, I think.
He also was very outspoken, beautifully outspoken about the life issues, about marriage, about issues that were really set front and center in the culture.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, that's what so upset the progressive left about him. He was an opponent of same-sex marriage, if that's how we term it. and a strong proponent for life and encouraging respect for life at every stage, trying to oppose now what some Australian states are adopting, assisted suicide, etc., etc. So Pell's record, by the way, also he was deeply concerned for the marginalized, for the homeless, etc. So he had a concern for folks right across the range of issues. But I think you're right, Teresa. It was those social issues, his opposition to the worst elements of the sexual revolution, etc., that really caused some folks, in the Australian media to want to target Pell. And that's what they did. But he held up so strongly and courageously against all their attacks.
It's so typical, though. If you look at history, you try to silence someone like that, and that brings out the true nature of who they are, their courage, their peacefulness, their love, the fact that he was so calm and prayed and kept such a powerful and detailed journal. It's like they didn't silence him. They made him, I think by doing that, they made him larger than life.
I think that's absolutely correct. And maybe that's a certain encouragement for us in our various locations, people who may be listening, not to be afraid to speak up. Pell had as his Episcopal motto, "Be not afraid." Of course, he was inspired by St. John Paul II's initial great homily, and Pell lived that out in every dimension of his life. And I think reading folks like Archbishop Fisher, Archbishop Julian Porteous, they're Australian archbishops, one in Sydney, one in Hobart, they show how Pell's influence is living on in the Australian church today. And look, I assure your listeners, Teresa, that even though a number of the authors in Remembering Cardinal Pell are Australians, Australian English, you're able to understand it. They're not writing in a foreign tongue, although Tracy Rowland jokes that sometimes Cardinal Pell himself could revert to some sort of colloquial Australian language. He was such a man's man.
I wonder what he would think of the fact that Cardinal Newman is going to be named a doctor of the church, being that he loved education so much. I think he'd be thrilled.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And Cardinal Pell was a devotee of St. John Henry Newman, and Pell gave a number of lectures and wrote about conscience and how people misunderstand Newman on conscience. And so he would be absolutely delighted because he saw Newman as such a great figure. Pell, of course, had studied at Oxford. He got a doctorate in church history there soon after his ordination, and he always had a great love for England, and part of that was his years at Oxford and his connection to the whole sort of Cardinal Newman English Catholic thinking, that recusant thinking, etc., was very important to him. He also, I might add, Teresa, he had a terrific love and regard for the United States. Great friends here like George Weigel and Cardinal George, and he had visited the United States early on. I say in my brief piece in the book that we had a slight disagreement over the Kennedy family because Cardinal Pell had met Bobby Kennedy in 1967. And I would say got caught up a little in the sort of the glow of the Kennedy magic. This is one of the things that was so terrific about him. He was so wide-ranging in his interests. He could talk about anything, and he didn't mind an argument or a discussion, etc. So I tried my best to say, hey, listen, if you're looking for any of the Kennedy men, I think the best might have been the brother-in-law, Sergeant Shriver. And he took that under advisement. So.
But see, that's the kind of man, though, Pell was. He could talk to people and disagree with them and do it respectfully. We're slowly, I think, learning to do that again in our country, but still, the United States of America, it's still very bad. Everybody has to agree. If you don't agree with me, then I'm going to silence you or ignore you. And we see this all the time with our media here. There's been new surveys showing that the secular media very rarely, if ever, have anyone on that disagrees with them, which is not what the media are supposed to be, especially if you're a so-called journalist. And Cardinal Pell just exuded the fact that we need to listen to each other.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. He wanted to engage folks. He was prepared to go on and debate folks. He had a famous debate in Australian television with Richard Dawkins, the atheist promoter, and he didn't mind the back and forth. One of the things that was so key about him, he was keen to pursue the truth. He didn't want to just bow down before the sort of secular wisdom, whatever it was. He did not think our task was to kneel before the world. He wanted to evangelize the world. So for him, engagement was crucial. You had to get out there and mix it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Father, thank you so much for spending so much time with us this morning. What a joy it was to have you on for 2 segments. And again, reminding people to pick up a copy of the book, Remembering George Cardinal Pell. Any final thoughts about the Cardinal you'd like to let people know, Father?
Look, Teresa, he was a man of quiet strength, of deep resilience, and truly, truly deep faith. And I think he gave a witness to us all, and I hope your listeners may pick up the book, and I think their own faith will be nourished by reading about George Cardinal Pell. So thanks so much for having me on and allowing me to talk.
What a joy. Thank you. God bless you for sharing your thoughts and your insights on an amazing man for our time, the late George Cardinal Pell. The book, Remembering George Cardinal Pell, our guest, Father Bill Miscamble, one of the many contributors. Pick up a copy. You can find it on our religious catalog and also, of course, through our friends at Ignatius. We'll be right back on a Tuesday morning. Stay tuned. Hope you're having a beautiful Wednesday on this, the feast of St. Monica. Pray for us. Never give up on praying. Think of the word PUSH as an acronym. Pray until something happens. Jot that one down. Be persistent in prayer. Pray always. Always, always, always. Okay. Coming up tomorrow on the show, we're going to have so much fun. You won't even be able to stand it. We have fun every day, but in particular when we're live on location, that gives the show a whole different feel. So here's what we're going to do. Here's a little scoop for you. We are going to play with the format just a bit. We'll give you the weather at the top of the hour, but we're going to skip the news in the first hour of the program tomorrow. We'll have it in the second hour for you. But being that there are so many people that are going to be at the conference, or at the conference this week actually, that will be around us for the live broadcast, I am just going to grab as many people as possible and just have some fun and talk about the importance of Catholic radio. It'll be up close and personal, as we say in the business. I'm going to be grabbing Dr. Ray Guarendi, hopefully our own Jack Williams, the head of radio, and many other people who are there. So we're just going to do a straight live hour and have a lot of fun talking about dynamics of radio in general. Maybe oldie but goodie like myself and Tom Price will have a great conversation about where the business has come, how far we've come in many years that we've been doing Catholic radio broadcasting. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you can tune in. I think it's going to be great. And we'll also give you an update on how things are going in terms of the growth of Catholic radio. How many affiliates do we have now? What are some of the biggest growing areas in Catholic radio? It is going to be a blast. Live from the EWTN radio conference. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.